I remember looking around and being fascinated with the fact that colors were completely different than anything I'd ever seen. This place is here for you to re-remember who you are, because beyond this body, you are something so much greater.
Today we are talking with Devon Kramer. Devon had a near-death experience just 7 years ago, which opened him up to receiving downloads of information about sacred geometry, compassion, and kindness. He now offers this incredible knowledge as well as the spiritual insight he gained to his students through a program that he founded called 9 Vibes Universal, where he imparts his wisdom to those interested in fostering their own connection with the divine. We are excited to talk with him today. So welcome, Devon. We are looking forward to hearing your story.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm really excited to be here.
Devon, if you can start with telling us a little bit about your lifestyle leading up to your NDE, and then share with us how and what happened on that infamous day.
Yeah, so my NDE is a huge changing point for me. Prior to that, I was actually extremely agoraphobic. I hadn't been to a movie theater or a restaurant in over 12 years. I was in and out of the hospital over 22 times in 2 years. I had kidney infections, kidney stones, and kidney failure. Things were not going well for me, basically. I was on very, very intense pain meds because that's really all they can give you when you're going in and out of the hospital in that way. So I actually started the journey to want to change my life just by wanting to get off pain meds. So I learned about meditation and the basics of it. I learned about, very simple things like chakras. I wanted to transition from pain meds to healthier things, such as like CBD and things like that. So I was basically on a journey to try to better myself, but to go from where I was, such, fear, it was basically like baby steps. I wasn't really doing that much except for very small things. And so January 20th was the day that I had my NDE. It was 2017. And I had come home from a day, just a normal day. I was playing with my dog. Everything was fine. And I came inside, was making lunch. I did my CBD. And all of a sudden, I felt like my whole entire body was shutting down. I can only equate this if you've ever passed out before. It's kind of where everything starts slowly closing in on you and you know that something bad is going on. And so I instantly grabbed my phone to call 911. We're talking about, 30 seconds. I grabbed my phone, I called 911. I did not know what was wrong at the time. And so I just told them I felt like I had been poisoned because that's what it felt like. I'd assume that that's what it would feel like if your body was rejecting whatever was happening and it was just shutting down on you. And so I let her know that. About the time that I got those words out, I think I said maybe a few other lines, but I don't remember, before the phone hit the counter and I'm out. So the next thing I know is I'm standing up and I'm looking around and I feel like I'm in time and outside of time. And a good way to describe this is if you've ever watched like your favorite show, like if you're watching Friends on TV, everything is lively and it's like a completely different time. And some people even wish they were in the show at that time. It would be like that, but going to the actual set and nothing's going on. It felt like that, just two completely different times. And so I remember looking around and being fascinated with the fact that colors were completely different than anything I'd ever seen. So at the point that I realized I'm outside of time, I'm starting to understand, okay, outside of time, colors are different. And that's what I accepted in my mind. The colors were vibrant. They were so bright, but they didn't actually hurt my eyes. So I'm looking around at everything. I can kind of look around, but I didn't actually look behind me, which is an interesting part of this. I'm just looking forward at all these different things and really focusing on the colors. And they also look like they were alive. And I don't have a description of this because it's not something, that we have something to relate to, but it really did look like they were alive. And so I ended up walking around the corner. And this is where things kind of changed because I looked at the TV. And because of the fact that it was a very, very important day, all the news were talking about things and there was just so much going on the TV. And when I went around the corner to look at the TV, nothing was happening. It's frozen. I found that exceptionally odd. And so I'm sitting there and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is it. a comet came, a nuke happened, something happened, and everybody just simultaneously, died. And the moment I had that thought was the moment that my guide showed up, because instantly I got the answer, no, this is your journey. This is about you. So at that point, I realized I died. And what was so fascinating was I spent my whole life being raised in the church. I believed everything that the church taught. I'm not against the church. I just understand the illusions now. And so I believed that there should be a hell waiting for me. There should be something, because prior to this moment, I was not enlightened. I wasn't walking that walk. There was no hell. There was no judgment. There was only this overwhelming kindness, compassion, love, and trust, which is what I live by, in my life. And it was just knowing that I only made the mistakes I made because I didn't understand something. So it would fill in the blank of what I didn't understand. So at the point that I realized that I had died and I'm in what would be considered the afterlife, which is just basically after your life, I started asking questions in my mind. I didn't actually remember all the questions I asked until I started doing interviews. Then all of a sudden I'm going, oh, I remember, asking this, or I'll get a download and I'll be like, I've heard this before. Where have I heard this? So I'm asking all these questions in my mind as I'm walking around, and I looked outside and there was this bunny that was on the ground, but it was moving, but you could actually see the energy behind the bunny as it was moving. So it's almost like being in a Tron game. I mean, this was just overwhelmingly amazing, but yet all I felt was just kindness, compassion, love, and trust. If you've ever in this world felt alone, broken, abandoned, imagine feeling protected and together and healed and loved. It was just the complete opposite of everything I was living. So I remember the moment that I finished asking questions and I went, okay, what comes next? And at that point, this light was coming towards me, but it wasn't a light I could see. It was a light I could feel. That was it. It was a light that I could feel, and I knew that it was coming towards me, and I knew that I wanted to go towards it. That's what I knew. There's no fear. I just knew that this was the way it was supposed to be. And so I sat down on this chair that I have, and I remember thinking to myself, I don't want to do this alone. That's what I really thought. It's like, I didn't want to do it alone. Even though I had this guide, I wanted someone with me. But because I was agoraphobic, I had no friends. I had nobody, and who would you call anyway in this situation? I didn't have that type of connection. But I did have my lab, my best friend in the world. And so I remember calling her over. And when I looked to where she was is when I saw my body. My body was laying down on the ground where I had fallen. And that's why I said I never looked back when I first fell. I just started looking forward. And so she came over to me. She rested her head on my lap. I remember petting her and feeling this energy. So you didn't feel fur, you just felt energy. I closed my eyes. I took a breath. I knew that what was coming next was this light. And at that exact moment was the moment I opened my eyes and I'm back where I was laying down, and there's EMTs who are standing over me. I can't hear them. My ear, I couldn't hear anything that they were saying. I couldn't really communicate anything. So it took a while to get to that place. And then once I was at that place, I couldn't let go of the fact that I died. I still believe that I died. This was just another chapter of whatever I was experiencing. And so they stayed with me for a very long time, which is not something that EMTs do. They stayed with me for a very long time until I was at a place to accept that I was alive, accept that I was okay. They didn't take me to the hospital, which I find very interesting because 2 years later, I actually had another mini stroke. So both of them correlated together. It's just that I was 33. So I never in a million years would have thought that I had a stroke. But that's what ended up happening is I had a stroke. I was bleeding in my brain. 2 years later, I found out I had a brain aneurysm. And because of this experience, it saved my life. Because one of the downloads I received was I was going to die at the age of 45 of a brain issue. But at this time, again, I didn't know that I had had a stroke. So 2 years later, when I went to the hospital, the doctor basically was like, I have a hunch. Ended up doing a scan, found I had a brain aneurysm, and saved my life. So all of it, ever since that moment, I have been receiving daily downloads, information, I've been teaching, I've been working with people, and that's basically my life today.
So when you said you were in like sort of this transitory state, right, where you were able to walk around your house, were you in spirit walking around your house at that point?
I would assume that I was in spirit because I saw my body. And that's the only correlation I can have, is that since I saw my body, I had to have been outside of it in some way.
And was that because it had just happened, so you were still very connected to where your body was? Because I know some people tend to say that they go out into like this abyss, like into this dark blackness, but it seems like you were kind of staying close to your home.
Yeah, I never left the actual living room in that whole experience. And so it could very much be that I was connected to my body. Clearly, I was meant to come back, which is kind of the whole point of NDEs, right? We all return to somehow tell our stories. And so I stayed very, very close. I also knew, though, that I didn't want to go anywhere alone. So until my lab came over, I wasn't even ready to leave the living room, in essence.
And then when you said you were walking around the house and then you sat down on a chair, did you feel like you had a body?
Right. So that's the weirdest thing, is I saw my body. So my brain knows that my body's over there. Well, the reason I mentioned the chair is because I do remember. I remember sitting down in that chair and feeling it like you would sit down in a chair. The same way that I remember that last breath I said. That breath, why would you breathe in if you're not in your body? But I do remember breathing in deeply before that light was coming. And so it was almost like both. I experienced both at the exact same time.
So I want to jump back to you talking with your dog during this experience, or your dog being able to see you, it sounds like. Is that right?
I was able to call her over, and she had come over from where she was, which was around the corner. So clearly she heard me, came, rested her head where I was actually sitting. So it wasn't like she laid down on the ground. She absolutely put her head right on my lap.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it's a powerful connection, because when she passed, I was able to see her energy in a meditation that looked exactly like it did in that experience.
So you didn't encounter other people, or you can't tell us if there are pets on the other side.
I can tell you that when Nova passed, and that was so hard. That was on Thanksgiving 3 years later, that I actually went into a meditation, like I said, and the only way I got through this was I was playing ball with her in that meditation, energy on energy, and it was crystal clear that our pets very much are energetically with us, that we can tap into that at any point in time, and that they are in the afterlife when we get there.
You're talking about the colors that you saw after, while you were in the afterlife. Have you ever seen that movie with Robin Williams? Oh gosh, I just looked it up. Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
When the way you described it, it feels like that. Like, is that anything?
That would be very close, yes, because when I watched that movie, the way that they painted and things like that with color, and it was like you were seeing almost transcendent colors. Yes, that is how it was. Except for the most interesting thing is, it's almost like these colors exist. We just can't see them here, but that they're all around us.
Because I've heard a lot of other people who've had NDEs talk about these amazing, incredible colors. And I know you mentioned it's hard to explain. It's hard for me to wrap my mind around the fact that there's colors that we don't see, because I don't understand that concept. Because if you look at, a palette, like a color wheel, there's the gradients of colors that bleed into each other. So literally every single color that exists is available for us to look at through that palette. And I would imagine if you just amplify those colors where they're brighter, that's how I relate to what you just mentioned about that, and when other people talk about that, because I don't understand what it means when people say there are colors that we can't experience here, that my brain doesn't comprehend that.
And that makes a lot of sense. I know that there are animals who see colors. Like, for instance, there's a shrimp that sees 13 million colors. Now, again, we're just reading this in a book. We can't really correlate what that actually looks like, or explain that. But I do know that what I understood about this Earth is that Earth is specifically 3D because it has duality, and then it has an observer. So we are the observers. And so you have fear that is below, and you have love that is above. And so they create this space or this 3D space, basically, where we're having an experience. Light and color, sound, taste, smell, touch, all of these things, we can perceive about 10% of it without actually doing any work. And that's that perfect balance. 10% is that perfect balance. As you start to work through the fears of your life, start to change energy, start to transform energy, you actually end up expanding what you can experience, what you can taste, what you can smell, what you can touch, what you can see. And so as you do this, you'll start to expand and be able to see more of these colors. And so it's one of the things that when I'm working with students, we talk about this, is that all around you is energy. You just can't see it. But the more that you do the work, whether it be enlightened work, whether it be, Reiki work, whatever it happens to be, whatever is going to alleviate, which is exactly the word we want to use, alleviate that pressure off of you, then you're going to be able to see more. And the best way to think about this is when you take a picture. Okay, so when you take a picture and you compress that image so you can email it to your friend, it loses quality. Okay, so the more compressed your life is, the less quality you have. The less quality, the less you see. And so as you alleviate that, then you start to see more of it and you start to have that experience.
And Devon, do you feel like you have any fear now of dying again?
Not at all. Not even a little bit. In fact, the only thing that I am actually afraid of in this area is not being without Caitlin. So when I had my experience, it was me. It was me alone, and I was good with that. And when I met Caitlin, it was one of those things where I didn't actually have the answer for another person. How does that work? And so, she, ever since I met her, she has been my ride or die, absolutely my best friend, and I can't imagine this life without her. But in terms of the afterlife, there isn't even a question. When I'm ready to go, I'm very much okay with that. And I spend a lot of time trying to help, mothers who have lost children and things like that understand this, is that there's so much more to this life. And if we just trusted a little bit, we would actually live this life without the fear of the end and start living in the present moment.
Do you feel like maybe that's part of why you had to go through that experience to come back with that message for people?
I do, very much so. I was disconnected. I had no bonds except for my dog, basically. And this life is about bonds. You're here to experience bonds. In fact, bonds keep us alive. The more bonds that you have, the more energy you can actually move around, which is what keeps us healthy. You'll notice people who are alone, people who are isolated, they get sick very easily because they just don't have bonds to be able to move that energy around. And so I understood my own illness. I understood what I was doing. And absolutely, I came back to share these messages.
And switching gears a little bit, I've heard people reference Earth as a prison planet, and that we may or may not have the ability to choose whether we reincarnate or not. Did you come back with any knowledge or information around that topic?
Yes, absolutely. So I understand why people think that it's a prison, the same way that I understand why they think it's a school. But you don't go to college to relearn what you already know. You go to college because you think you don't know it, and then you're learning it. This place is here for you to do two things. One, to remember who you are, because beyond this body, you are something so much greater. This body, and in fact, just look at when you're a baby to when you're 99. There's not a single part of us, that you would even recognize. And so the body is very much the thing that allows us to have physicality. It's the whole entire point. I can touch something. I can't go to the afterlife and want to know what chocolate tastes like if I never experienced what chocolate tastes like. So you get to have these experiences here so that you can embellish them in the afterlife. And so the afterlife is very much there after your life. Here's where you have the experiences, and then there is that part. The other thing I think that is exceptionally important is there is not a single person, and I know this might not go over well, there's not a single person who actually doesn't choose to leave here. And the reason for that is because if you could put into a book the wonderment of what dreams may come or any of these things, then you would understand that when people are in these moments, sometimes they choose to go on. Sometimes if your mom died when you were young, you want to have that whole experience with your mom because you already lived, the rest of your life. And the people who are here that are mourning, they just don't know how to accept that because they're not experiencing it. Experience is very, very important to understand, why people end up leaving. So there are many things that can happen to you in this life. You can become paraplegic, you can get in car accidents, you can go all the way to death. But death is absolutely something you choose. Free will is the most powerful thing in this universe. And it's one of the downloads I got with the understanding of the number 137. which is the fine structure constant, the glue that holds everything together. The 137 is free will because it's choice. Right? If you take the double slit experiment and you have the particles that go through the different slits, right? If someone observes it, they act differently. When someone's not observing it, they act differently. So the whole entire point is they're choosing how to act. So something as small as a photon of light has choice. Why wouldn't we believe that we do?
You mentioned your downloads. Could you elaborate more on that? And as far as you got them that day, but now you're getting them daily.
Yeah, so they started very simple. They started with things like look up Nikola Tesla. So that's what I did. I was not a mathematician. I was not into science. I went to graphic design for school, which was also online. I worked online in IT. So I was not into any of that. And so I started learning about Nikola Tesla. And then I would get another message that would be like, Nikola Tesla was talking about vortex math. So then I would learn vortex math. I would look at it and I'd go, oh, there's that 3, 6, and 9, that Tesla would be talking about. And then from there, it would go into Fibonacci, and from Fibonacci into time, and from time into quantum mechanics. And it just kept getting larger and larger. And again, it was conversations I had already had. So it was really easy for me to just jump on it really quickly. I've had people ask me that, like, how is it that you know this stuff? And it's like, I've heard it before. It's the only way that I know how to explain it. And so I started receiving about charging water. That was one of the biggest ones that I kicked off with 9 Vibes was, Dr. Emoto did some amazing work to show that when you speak to water, it restructures itself. And so I had learned the chakra frequencies. I had found them in the Bible, which was so amazing because technically the Bible should have nothing to do with chakras, but it was actually found in the book of Numbers. And so once I was able to say, okay, these are the chakra frequencies, I started charging my water to them. And the water was becoming structured. I was getting healthier. I am healthier today than I have ever been. I actually have kidneys that have reversed, and they are healthier than they were, which is something that's extremely rare. And so I just kept trusting these downloads, and they started just paving a path. I understand manifestation, how the universe works, electricity, magnetism. It just keeps going on and on. And so I spend my days trying to put it together to try to help people wherever it is at their level to understand these things.
And I know your downloads were a lot around this sacred geometry, like what you're talking about. Could you share a little bit more about that? What is it that you teach your students through your program that you developed?
Yeah, so sacred geometry is awesome. So first off, it's called 9 Vibes because 9 is the core of everything. If you were to go ahead and just take all the numbers in the universe, you can reduce it down to 9 numbers. Because at the point that you reach 10, 1 plus 0 is going to be 1. 12, 1 plus 2 is going to be 3. So it's constantly going back to those 9 numbers no matter what. So 9 is the most powerful energy that exists in this universe, and that's why I believe it is unconditional love. It's in everything if you're really looking for it. That's why I say that there's truth in all, but not all is truth, and it's up to us to find it. And so once you start studying 9, then you start getting into shapes. And what's so cool is there are these 5 platonic solids. You have the tetrahedron, the octahedron, the dodecahedron, the hexahedron, and the isosahedron. And all of these actually end up having degrees when you add up their different angles that equal to 9. So for instance, a tetrahedron is 720, 7 plus 2 plus 0 is 9. The octahedron is going to be 1,440, 1 plus 4 plus 4 is 9. So all of them, the dodecahedron, the highest one, ends up being 6,480, 6 plus 4 plus 8 is 18, and that's a 9. And so I started teaching the understanding that 9 is all around us. This energy is all around us. It's in the shapes that make up our reality. Buddha is the one who basically said these 5 shapes, you unfold them and they just keep unfolding into everything in this universe. And they all are found inside the flower of life. So when you take the flower of life and you end up drawing lines, you end up having all of these shapes inside of it, because the most powerful thing about these 5 shapes is if you put them in a circle, their edges end up hitting the circle perfectly and balanced. There are only 5 shapes that actually do this. And so that's why they're called the platonic solids. So from there, then, we expanded into the 64 tetrahedra, which is made up of 144 triangles, and each triangle is 180 degrees. So 144 times 180 is 25,920. And that number matters because that's also the precession of the equinox. So when you take the full rotation of the Earth through the 12 zodiacs, it's 25,920 years. And so here it is, you've got shapes that are directly correlating to the cosmos. And so my ultimate goal is to show people that there is a pattern, that there's a design, that this is not a random occurrence. This life is not random. It's very much designed and it's very much chosen, and it's both. It's designed if you're not choosing, and then it's created when you are choosing. And I think that's what's so powerful about it.
That is fascinating. I feel like I could talk to you all day about just the number 9, like
Right.
literally, and just numbers, period.
And you talk about using these numbers at the right times of your life on the right days, and that will actually enhance maybe manifesting or just bringing about a more positive outcome for things. Is that right?
Yes. So I created the 9 Vibes calendar, and it's basically something that you can live aligned with. But the theory behind it is that we have 7 days a week. What if we were supposed to have 9? That was my thought. That was my original thought. What if we were supposed to have 9? Well, if we actually had 9 days a week, we would have 36 days a month, every month. No carryovers, no mistakes, no extra days that hang over. Everything would be 36 days. And if you took those 36 days and you multiplied by 12 months, you would end up with 432 days a year. Now, 432 is a powerful number. Bach, Beethoven, all the famous artists, they actually tuned their instruments to 432A. That was supposed to be nature's natural tuning. Now, we ended up changing it during World War II. We changed it to a more synthesized, which ended up being 440 hertz. 440 hertz causes migraines, headaches, stomach aches, things like that. Now, again, I don't like to put blame on things. In all honesty, it's just cheaper. It's cheaper to do it through a box than it is to do it through a whole orchestra. But 432 is a very powerful number. If you end up taking that number, 25,920, and you divide that by 432, you end up with 60. Or you can reverse it. Divide it by 60, you get 432. So it's showing you time is directly correlated to this frequency that we are supposed to be living at. So once you're at 432, every 5 years, you would end up having 2,160 days. 2,160 is actually the moon's diameter. So it's 2,160 miles in diameter. Well, the moon is directly correlated to the zodiacs. So if you multiply 2,160 times the 12 zodiacs, you get exactly 25,920 years.
Wow.
So I created this calendar with the understanding that all you have to do is wake up and look at your date and add the month, the day, and the year individually. You can break it up into the smallest numbers, 5 plus 2 plus 8 plus 2 plus 2 plus 4, and then keep adding that till you have 1 digit left. Once you have 1 digit, if it's a 3, just be more kind that day. That's all you had to do. If it was a 6, give more that day, right? Just give, whatever it happens to be. And if it's a 9, raise to your highest vibration. Read a book, do whatever it is that really raises that vibration. And by doing this, the coolest part is you don't have to change your religion, your path, your walk. You don't have to change anything, because if we were doing it, we would all be connecting worldwide by being kind, by giving more, and by raising on what would be considered the 9-5 day, which would be a 9 as a digital root.
It's interesting because I believe I've heard that the calendar has been changed from ancient biblical times to now, and it's been done on purpose, probably along the lines of what you're saying, because if we did have the actual mathematics of how the calendar really works, it would benefit us better than what we're working on today.
And so to make it easier for people, I actually did create a GPT, so on OpenAI, and it's completely free, and you just basically click on it, what is today's date, and it will tell you all the information about the frequency. So that's what I would charge your water to. So for instance, if it is a 3-day, it would be 396 hertz, which is your root chakra frequency. And then it gives you all the information about what you can eat, which aligns with your root chakra, just everything that will really help you for that day. And so that's free to anyone that wants to use it.
We'll put that in the description. Going back to the numbers, I'm sure you've heard this, but Terrence Howard and his theory, have you heard that? The 1 plus 1 times 1 is not 1, it's 2. And what are your thoughts on that?
So it's a little bit difficult, because I don't think that people understand that the way that multiplication works is that it's 1 and then it's 1 time. So it's 2, and then it's 2 times. So if you were going to do 2 times 4, it's actually just 2 plus 2, which is why you end up with 4. So it's 2 times.
Yeah.
So if you actually reverse the whole process, it breaks down everything to do with the addition that's actually built into multiplication. So I've done a lot of research. I tried to, be like, oh, this is amazing, let's look into this. But it's only because of people's misunderstanding of what multiplication is that caused that to be something that can be talked about. It's supposed to be 2 and then 2 times, not 2 times 2. And so based off of that, we can't actually go back to that point and change 1 times 1 equals 2 because it's just one time. So
Yeah.
that's why it ends up being 1.
He makes a good point, though. I mean, he goes down a rabbit hole with it, and
Yes,
it's
yeah,
incredibly logical. So you can say to yourself, "Hey, he might have something here," But I'm
And-
with you with the it's 1. It's 1. I get what you're saying as well. So
yeah, we would have to basically break it open all the way back to Pythagoras, which is a very difficult, and that's usually why people have a hard time. Whether you're Neil deGrasse Tyson, because I watched the 3-hour interview, there are multiple areas where there's very much ego. There is not a single bit of information I have received in all the years of download that I could ever say, I'm just going to take all this information and destroy society. There's not even, it's not even close. So, there's truth in all, but not all is truth. And the linchpin is 1. That is amazing. That is awesome. The way that he was able to find the space in the flower of life and create a shape that we didn't have, that's fantastic. That's amazing. Whether or not it represents hydrogen, that isn't really, that's kind of jumping to, conclusion. It didn't actually explain how that ends up being hydrogen. And we can't actually separate water by using frequency. If we could, we would have drinking water all over the world for everybody. That would be amazing if we could actually do that. So there are just some things that didn't correlate, but some things were absolutely amazing, and I give props, absolutely.
I'm glad you mentioned the water again, because I did want to ask you more about that. You mentioned charging your water. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? How does that work?
Yeah, so basically the coolest part is that for the longest time, we thought we had to have these really high-end technologies for our water to be able to be affected by frequency. And it wasn't until I think it was like 3 years ago where people were buying these EMF spectrums and they were testing. So they would take headphones, and I did the same thing. I put headphones around my water. I played the frequency. But before I did that, I tested the water. So if the water was at a 500 frequency, then I play 528. And lo and behold, it's now 528 when I test it. So I didn't need all this equipment. All I needed was something, because the water absorbs it. The water, it's just like memory, right? Because that's what Dr. Emoto proved, is that water holds memory. We're made up of water, which means that's where most likely all of our memories are actually stored. It's in this water. So you basically, like I said, you would check the calendar. And if you wanted to live aligned by that, if it was a 4-day, it would be 417 hertz, because that would be your sacral chakra. You put the headphones around the water, you play it for 9 minutes, again, all about 9. You play it for 9 minutes, and then the water would restructure, and you'd be able to drink it at that point, and it would basically be the water now that is interacting with all the water in your body. And the coolest part is we now know a set of headphones, a cell phone, anything close, the water actually absorbs it. And so you can do it anywhere in the world with very little money if you had that opportunity.
So Devon, I understand that you have a paper that you just published, and this is brand new information that is just coming out now. Could you share a little bit more about that with us?
Yes, so I did actually get a paper that's published. I also have a patent so that when it's actually going to be used, because I found a use case for this actual download that I received. So I ended up, first and foremost, I absolutely love the Fibonacci sequence. Anybody on 9 Vibes knows I talk about it all the time. If you take the Fibonacci sequence and it continues growing out exponentially, but if you take the last digit, it has this hidden pattern of 60 digits that repeat to indefinitely. Now, what's really cool about that is you can create a clock with that, right? Because you end up having 60. And when you apply those numbers on a circle, you actually end up having the 5s and the 0s that fit perfectly as if it is a clock. It would be 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, and those are the only 5s and the only 0s that are actually found on that. So I have been studying Fibonacci for a long time, and I started to get into prime numbers. Didn't know that much about prime numbers. For some reason, it's like when you're learning one side, you don't really want to put all the effort into learning the other side. So I started getting downloads about prime numbers. So I started working with them, and all of a sudden I noticed this pattern when I was working with them. And what it was is that every number I was working with could actually be broken up into a prime and a Fibonacci number. Okay. So for instance, if you take one can be expressed, I have this whole list of them because of course I haven't memorized them, but one can be expressed as 2 as a prime minus 1 as a Fibonacci gives you 1. And that goes for every number. So as I continued this, I just kept writing the number down and then writing how it could be broken up. And every single one did. So the first thing I thought was, okay, I need to run some tests. So I coded up some Python. I ran a test on 1,000 numbers. And I was like, well, this is interesting. It only gave me 2 of them that doesn't fit. Now, whenever you have an outlier in anything like this, you pay attention to the outliers more than you do the things that are working, because you're like, why? Why doesn't this fit in there? So 551 is the very first number that does not actually fit into this. It's not a prime, and it's not a Fibonacci. It's not made up of that. And so then the next one is 637. Now, 637 is an important number, but I won't get into all of that. But instantly I noticed that, and I was like, well, that's really interesting. As it continues going, no matter how big I made the range, it kept staying within less than 1% that were outliers. So I did it all the way to 1 million. And I was like, let's do this. I ran the whole thing over the weekend, ran 1 million numbers. It came back at a 99.27% accuracy, leaving only less than 1% as outliers. So at this point, I'm interested. I'm like, what's going on here? It's almost like something is happening, but I don't quite understand it. So I wrote an academic paper. I did the abstract, I did everything, which, by the way, writing an academic paper is a difficult task. If you've never done it before, it took 4 hours. It was just one step after another after another. And so it is in the Journal of Theory for Numbers, basically, and it's huge. But the coolest part about it is that what it actually is telling us is it's telling us that since we know in 2022, the Nobel Prize winner proved that underneath quantum mechanics is math. That's what his whole entire award was about, was understanding that math is underneath quantum mechanics. Well, quantum mechanics is based off of the idea of what you observe changes. So when you observe something, you change it, like we talked about the double slit experiment. So here it is. We have what he won, which is showing that when you observe something, it actually changes. And then you have what's underneath that is math. And that's where the Primebonacci ratio comes in. That's what I decided to call it. I blended the two, the Primebonacci ratio. And it's basically saying that at the core of everything, at the start, at the building blocks, at the Legos of our life, every single Lego to a 99.27% accuracy is made up of a prime and a Fibonacci number, as if they fit in together. And what's so cool about this from a spiritual side is that Eckhart Tolle and Deepak really focus on teaching you about the present moment, the power of the present moment, staying in the present moment. And so when you look at this, so it's imagine you have like a block, like the Mario Brother game, okay? You have a solid block. So as your character is running along the block, that would be the prime and the Fibonacci blocks. They're all, solid and they're there and you're just running on top of them. But then all of a sudden out of nowhere comes a gap, right? This gap is basically what we're going to call the outlier, or the one that stood out of all the different numbers that I ran. And so if you get stuck in a gap, then you stay in a gap basically. But if you actually expand, which is what being in the present moment is all about. Being in the present moment is about expanding. That's the whole entire point. You study something, you learn something, you focus on something that makes you want to have it tomorrow. That's what it's, the whole point. And so as you continue expanding the container, what's so amazing is that 551 that I told you about, when I get to 610 as a number, 551 disappears. Because when I get to 610 is a Fibonacci, and now 59 is a prime. So 59 minus 610 takes you to 551. Therefore, it now officially fits right back into the system. So as it continues moving out, it actually fixes its gaps. So these gaps are like chaos in our life. As long as we keep expanding it, as long as we keep moving forward, they actually fill in themselves. And so that's that understanding of staying in the present moment. You don't go back to the past and stay in these outliers or these gaps. You continue moving forward and they will fix themselves as you continue staying in the present moment. So on top of that, I realized that our whole entire system of security is built off of Goldbach's conjecture. Goldbach's conjecture is very simple. It basically states that any number after 2 that is even is made up of 2 prime numbers. This is what our passwords are built off of, encryption, everything to do with the internet. It's all built off of this understanding. Well, that's still a 60% accuracy because you still have odd numbers that it doesn't work with. This is a 99.27% accuracy. And so that's when I knew that if we actually applied this to our encryption, even if you were trying to break into something, and let's say you broke it up into numbers, you no longer have to have the numbers to get into the system. You have to have what makes that number up. You have to have the 2 numbers that actually make it up. So if you had a number that was 22, you have to have 17 and 5, not 22 any longer, which makes cracking into things drastically more difficult. And so that's what I did my patent on, is the Primebonacci shield, which is basically an encryption that goes on top of our encryption.
Wow. I mean, that's incredible. First of all, congratulations. Like, that's amazing. This is very complex math. And I mean, I think I got 80% of what you were just saying. But I don't think I should be expected to get 100% of it because I just, this is beyond, above my pay grade. But where did this come from? How did you develop this concept? I mean, is this part of the downloads of information that you were receiving, or what led you to this?
Absolutely. So I got a download. I woke up in the morning. So downloads are very different for different people. I usually get downloads in the morning now. So it's like I will have a sentence or a voice that basically will say something, and I'll be like, oh, I need to look into that. And so this download was basically saying, you need to look into primes. I was never into primes, didn't care for primes, and it was like, you need to look into primes. And what's so fascinating is our whole universe is made up of electricity and magnetism. And now that we have this point where every block is made up of a prime and a Fibonacci, we now can apply which one's the magnetism, which one is going to end up being electricity. Well, based off of what Terrence Howard said, right, magnetism goes out. That's the whole thing. He was talking about your stomach. When you get older, your stomach goes out, you get shorter, right? So the idea is that primes do that. Primes go out. They never return back, right? But Fibonacci is very different. Fibonacci takes the old number, the present number, adds to the next one. So you always have to go back. You have to constantly do that to be able to get the next number. So here it is. Now I have electricity and I have magnetism in this Primebonacci ratio. So once I listened to the download, once I started studying it, then it started to make sense. Once it started to make sense, then I started looking and running tests, and it all just came together. But it is the most tangible download I have ever received. And in all the information that you've seen, I have a whole entire just plethora of information, even on a website. This is the one that I actually can academically back up because anyone can test it. There's no question. There's no having to change it into a digital root, having to take the last digit instead of the first digit. It's not Benford's law where we have to condense it down. It's literally right in front of us. We never saw it before. It's like a door. One of the very first things I did is put quite a bit of money into investigating whether or not anyone has published this, talked about it, and there was nothing that actually existed. And so that's when I jumped on it right away. And I was like, I wanted to share it with everybody is what I wanted to do. Because even as something as simple as let's take art, we now can take these numbers because we know that all of colors are built up of numbers. So now you can take these numbers, take the colors, break them up into their Primebonacci ratio and create art we've never seen before based off these patterns.
Do you think your paper is something that could be nominated for a Nobel Prize? Because it sounds like it's groundbreaking.
So that's the interesting thing. Everybody has their own goals in life. And I've been very clear from the moment I came back, I wanted to create something that was Nobel worthy because that's what changes the world. That's what sticks. That's what makes it, throughout time. And I've had multiple students who would say, off the information, you're going to win a Nobel. And I didn't really set it in my mind until about a year ago. I set that as a goal, and here it is right in front of me. So yes, absolutely. I think that this is because of the fact that, again, it doesn't need peer review. It needs just application. Just use it. It's right there. Very simple for anyone to verify. Very easy to teach children the understanding that the building blocks, the Legos of our world are made up of prime and Fibonacci. And most importantly, we did not create prime and Fibonacci. If you go off of Plato, right, Platoism is the understanding that this exists, but it exists all around us, but we have to bring it into our reality. And so we didn't create these numbers. Fibonacci is all the way up in the planets. The planets rotate following the pattern of Fibonacci. Plants rotate and grow based off of following the golden angle and Fibonacci. And so we didn't create this, we discovered it. So here it is, finding this is just amazing because it's always been there. We just didn't know. And that usually is what awards, are given for that.
Wow. You heard it here first, folks. We just discovered the next Nobel Prize winner.
Yep.
Comment in the section. Let us know how you feel about that, because this is exciting news. And I love that you relate it back to a practical use in life too, ways that it can be applied. You mentioned the art as well. So that's just incredible, Devon. And I just give you so much congratulations for that, because that is just groundbreaking work to be able to say that you had a part of and that you produced. So that's amazing. Good for you.
And again, one doesn't just wake up one day and say, I'm going to win a Nobel Peace Prize. Like, that doesn't happen. It's a direct experience from what you experienced, a direct correlation for sure.
Right, if you take the Big Bang Theory, he spent his whole life wanting one, so kind of deserved it at the end. But yeah, it was never a part of my life.
Well, you'll have to do another podcast once you win. You'll have to come back on. We discovered you. No, I'm just kidding.
We get credit for finding you.
Yeah.
So Devon, in closing, do you have any final message you can share for anyone listening today?
I live my life by a lot of different quotes. One of my favorite, as I said, is, there's truth in all, but not all is truth, which means no matter what you're looking at, the left or the right side, it doesn't matter. There is truth there. And there's a reason that people believe in it and that people love it, for a reason. And so as humanity, if we would spend more time looking at that answer, why is it that someone wants to do what they're doing? What is it about that is making them feel special, making them feel good? The same way that spirituality makes, people feel special. If we found that in all areas, I believe that we would unite a lot better. And the last thing is the understanding of patterns. Patterns are all around us. Energy is all around us. Manifestation is very easy when you understand that energy is all around you, and all you have to do is be that energy, connect to that energy. I think that books like The Secret did an amazing job of starting you on the journey, but they kind of stopped at a certain point. You have to become this energy because you have to realize that that's all we are. Everything just comes down to energy. And when we get to that level, your life then becomes the dream that you actually want it to be.
For anyone interested in working with Devon or signing up for his program, 9 Vibes Universal, we will put the website and contact information in the description of this video. Devon also has a book out called Living Aligned 369, which you can also find in the description as well. Devon, thank you so much for sharing your story and the knowledge that you received, as well as the inspiring message of hope that you now share with everyone. Much appreciation, and we thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.